You have been trained to love. Not just to love, but to need love, to crave it like air, to measure your worth by its presence or absence. From the moment you first heard a fairy tale, you were taught that love is the answer, the redemption, the happily ever after. But what if love is not the key to your freedom, but the lock on your cage? What if every heartbeat of desire, every whisper of "I need you," is not a bridge to connection, but a chain around your ankles, dragging you deeper into an ocean where you will never touch the bottom? Think of the last time you ached for someone. Not just wanted them, but ached. A hunger so deep it felt like a sickness. A longing that twisted your thoughts until you could barely recognize yourself. Was it love, or was it something darker? Something that masqueraded as devotion while quietly stealing your sovereignty, your peace, your ability to stand alone? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of piercing clarity, saw love for what it truly is. Not a divine union, but a biological trick, a cosmic deception designed to enslave you to the will of the species. You believe you are choosing, but in truth, you are being chosen. By forces older than reason, stronger than will. We tell ourselves love is sacred, but look closer. How many times have you contorted yourself to fit into someone else's vision of you? How many silences have you swallowed? How many desires have you buried, just to keep the fragile illusion of affection alive? Love, as we are taught to pursue it, is not freedom. It is performance. It is the art of making yourself small enough to be wanted, palatable enough to be kept. And the moment you tie your happiness to another's fleeting attention, you have already lost. Schopenhauer called it the will to life, the blind, irrational force that drives all living beings to reproduce, to perpetuate existence at any cost. And love? Love is its most cunning weapon. It dresses itself in poetry and promises, in trembling hands and whispered confessions. But beneath the velvet lies the steel. You are not falling in love. You are being pushed. Pushed by instincts you did not consent to, by a hunger you did not choose. The euphoria, the desperation, the unbearable need, none of it is yours. It is the species speaking through you, using you as a vessel for its own endless survival. And yet, we cling to the illusion. We call it fate, call it destiny, call it meant to be, because the alternative is too terrifying to face. That love, in its most primal form, does not care about you. It cares only for the continuation of life. Even if that means your heart becomes collateral damage. The lover who idolizes you today will discard you tomorrow, not out of malice, but because the will has moved on. The beloved you would die for is only a mirror, reflecting back the parts of yourself you have been taught to despise. This is the trap. Not the pain of rejection, not the bitterness of loss, but the far more insidious lie that love will save you, that another person's gaze can somehow make you whole. Schopenhauer's revelation is this: love is not your salvation. It is your sentence. And the only way to escape is to see the bars for what they are. To understand love as Schopenhauer saw it, you must first confront the unsettling idea that nearly everything you've been taught about desire is a lie. Not a gentle untruth, but a necessary deception. One woven so deeply into the fabric of human experience that to question it feels like blasphemy. Love, in the way we typically worship it, is not a meeting of souls but a collision of biological imperatives. A script written by forces that care nothing for individuality, for tenderness, for the private agonies of the heart. It is a game where the rules are rigged, and the only winning move is to see the board for what it is. At the core of Schopenhauer's philosophy is the concept of the will, an irrational, ceaseless striving that underlies all existence. The will does not think, does not reason. It simply wants, endlessly and indiscriminately. And in human beings, one of its most potent manifestations is romantic love. We like to believe our attractions are unique, that we are drawn to someone by virtue of their singular beauty, their irreplaceable spirit. But Schopenhauer dismantles this illusion with brutal precision. What you call chemistry, what you mistake for destiny, is merely the will's calculation of reproductive fitness. The flush of infatuation, the obsessive fixation, the way love can feel like possession. These are not signs of spiritual connection. They are the fingerprints of an impersonal force, manipulating you into serving its only true goal, the propagation of life. Consider, for a moment, the lover's despair, the way heartbreak can hollow a person out, make them question their very worth. Why does it hurt so much? Because the will has no regard for your happiness, only for its own perpetuation. When love fades or fails, it is not because you were unworthy, but because the biological imperative has moved on. The same force that once bound you to another now discards you, leaving you stranded in the aftermath, wondering what you did wrong. But you did nothing wrong. You were never in control to begin with. This raises a darker, more uncomfortable question. If love is an illusion, what does that make the beloved? Schopenhauer's answer is chilling in its clarity. The object of desire is always a projection, a screen onto which we cast our own unmet needs, our unhealed wounds. We do not love people. We love the idea of them, the way they make us feel about ourselves. The beloved becomes a mirror, reflecting back not who they truly are, but who we need them to be. And when they inevitably fail to live up to this fantasy, when they reveal themselves to be human, flawed, separate from our desires, we call it betrayal. But the betrayal was never theirs. It was ours, from the very beginning, in asking another person to be our salvation. And yet, even knowing this, we return to love like moths to flame. Why? Because the will is insatiable. It thrives on longing, on the sweet torment of almost having, on the cyclical rush of pursuit and disillusionment. This is the cruelest trick of all. Love's greatest allure is not fulfillment, but the promise of fulfillment, a promise it can never keep. The moment you possess what you desire, the enchantment begins to fade. The lover you once thought irreplaceable becomes ordinary. The passion that once felt like oxygen dwindles into routine. This is not accident, but design. The will must keep you hungry, keep you searching, or else you might stop reproducing altogether. Is there a way out? Schopenhauer's answer is not a comforting one. He does not offer a better love, a purer love, a love that transcends the trap. Instead, he offers something far more radical. The possibility of seeing the trap for what it is, and in that seeing, finding a kind of freedom. To recognize love as illusion is not to reject it entirely, but to engage with it consciously, to feel its pull without mistaking it for truth, to desire without worshipping desire. It is to love, perhaps, but with open eyes. There is an old tale, whispered in the margins of forgotten texts, about a sculptor who fell in love with his own creation. He carved her from marble with hands trembling from something deeper than skill. An ache, a hunger that lived in his ribs like a second heartbeat. When he finished, she was more than a statue. She was the sum of all his longing given form. He would sit for hours in the pale glow of dawn, tracing the curve of her stone cheek, whispering secrets he had never told another living soul. And then, as these stories always go, the gods took pity on him. She came to life, but here the tale twists. She did not love him. How could she? She was never real. She was only ever the hollow where his need had been. This is the hidden narrative of all romantic obsession. We do not love people. We love the ghosts we make of them. Schopenhauer understood this in his bones. The beloved is never the flawed, breathing, contradictory human before us. They are the vessel into which we pour every unmet fantasy, every unspoken prayer. And when they refuse to play their assigned role, when they are stubbornly, magnificently themselves, we call it heartbreak. But the fracture was never in them. It was in the delusion we called love. Consider the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, often held up as the ultimate romance. But look closer. Orpheus does not follow Eurydice into the underworld out of love for her. He follows because he cannot bear the silence she leaves behind. When he turns too soon, damning her to vanish a second time, we call it weakness. But perhaps it was the only honest moment in the entire tragedy. He did not want the real Eurydice, the one who would grow old, who would disagree with him, who would sometimes look at him with exhaustion rather than adoration. He wanted the memory, the perfect absence, the illusion. This is the cruel paradox at the heart of desire. We crave the beloved most acutely in their absence. Presence disappoints. Flesh disappoints. The actuality of another person, with their inconvenient moods, their separate will, their terrifying autonomy, is the death of the fantasy. And so we construct elaborate rituals to keep the illusion intact. We perform grand gestures, we cling to early moments of intoxication. We replay conversations like sacred texts, all to avoid the terrible truth. The person we love does not exist. They cannot, because love, in its most primal form, is not about knowing, it is about not knowing. It thrives in the gaps, the mysteries, the spaces where we can still project our salvation. Schopenhauer saw this with icy clarity. The will does not want us satisfied. It wants us starving. It wants us forever chasing the shadow on the wall, mistaking it for substance. This is why the lover's gaze is so often possessive, why the language of love so easily slips into the language of ownership. You are mine, I am yours, but no one belongs to anyone. These are the desperate incantations of a species trying to outrun its own solitude. There is another story, this one from the East, about a man who begged the universe for a vision of the divine. After years of prayer, the gods answered. They showed him an endless hall of mirrors, each reflecting his own face back at him from every possible angle. At first he wept, thinking it a punishment. But then came the realization. This was the revelation. There had never been anything else to worship. Perhaps this is the only way to love without chains, to see the game for what it is. Not to stop playing, but to play with eyes wide open. To touch another's skin knowing full well you are also touching your own hunger. To whisper, I want you without pretending it means I know you. Schopenhauer's genius was not in denying love's power, but in exposing its machinery. The trap only springs if you believe it's a doorway. The realization that love is, at its core, a biological illusion does not have to lead to cynicism or resignation. In fact, it can be the beginning of a more honest, more liberated way of relating. One where desire is neither demonized nor deified, but seen for what it is. A force of nature, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, that can either bind you or set you free depending on how you wield it. The key lies in shifting from unconscious longing to conscious choice, from being enslaved by the will to standing apart from it just enough to reclaim your autonomy. This is not the rejection of love, but its reinvention. Imagine for a moment a different kind of intimacy, one where you no longer demand that another person complete you, where you stop expecting love to fill the hollow places inside. What would that look like? It might begin with the simple but radical act of seeing the beloved as they truly are, not as a symbol or a salvation, but as a fellow traveler, flawed and magnificent in their humanity. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy becomes unexpectedly tender. By stripping away the illusions, we make room for something rarer. Connection without possession, desire without desperation. Love that is chosen rather than demanded by the blind urges of biology. The practical implications of this shift are profound. Consider how many relationships crumble under the weight of unmet expectations, how much suffering arises from the belief that love should be eternal, effortless, all-consuming. These are the myths that keep us trapped. But what if, instead of asking love to be perfect, we asked it to be real? What if we stopped punishing our partners for failing to live up to an impossible ideal and started appreciating them for the messy, imperfect humans they are? This is not settling. It is waking up. It is the difference between loving a fantasy and loving a person, between being in love with love and actually loving. There is a quiet power in this approach, one that transforms relationships from battlegrounds of need into spaces of mutual recognition. When you no longer look to another person to define your worth or heal your wounds, you are free to love them without fear. Arguments lose their sting because you are no longer fighting for survival. Jealousy loosens its grip because you no longer see the beloved as property. Even heartbreak, when it comes, becomes something different, not a referendum on your value, but a natural ebb in the rhythm of human connection. This is the paradox Schopenhauer hints at but never fully articulates. By accepting love's illusions, we transcend them. And what of solitude? that great terror of the romantic imagination. Here, too, there is a reframing to be done. The fear of being alone is often the fear of facing oneself, the unfinished, unadorned self that exists outside of anyone else's gaze. But it is only in this space of aloneness that we can cultivate the wholeness that makes true connection possible. A love born of need is fragile. A love born of choice is unshakable. This is why the most enduring relationships are often those where both partners have learned to stand alone before standing together. They are not two halves making a whole, but two wholes choosing to walk the same path. Does this mean passion must be sacrificed? Not at all. Passion thrives in presence, not projection. The fire of desire burns brightest when it is free of the damp weight of expectation. Think of the difference between clutching at water and letting it flow through your fingers. One is an exercise in frustration. The other, a fleeting but exquisite sensation. So it is with love. The tighter you grip, the less you feel. The more you demand permanence from something inherently fleeting, the more you miss the beauty of its momentary brilliance. This is the transformational call at the heart of Schopenhauer's unflinching gaze. To love knowing love's true nature is to love without chains. It is to hold the beloved with open hands, to cherish without clinging, to desire without demanding. It is, in the end, the only way to love that does not become a prison. The choice is yours, to sleepwalk through the illusion or awaken within it.